Today I want to talk a little bit about, I suppose we'll call it HMS Celtic, a premium Tier 7 heavy British cruiser. This is basically a copy-paste of the USS Baltimore, Tier 7 Tech Tree cruiser, and it just happens to sail under the British flag, which gives it a couple British characteristics. But for all intents and purposes, this ship is the Baltimore. The playstyle is essentially the same. The only difference is in some of the stats. The Celtic has a little bit less HP than the Baltimore, 36,700 compared to, I think, 42,000 for the Baltimore. There's some differences in the guns as well. These guns have the pre-buff Baltimore numbers on their AP shell maximum damage and HE shell maximum damage, although they do seem to have a slightly quicker reload than the Baltimore by about 1 second. Turret traverse, I think, is similar. As far as the performance on the actual shells, the fire starting chance is low at 10% for guns like this. And the AP, it seems to be actually very effective. I don't know if it's quite the same as the Baltimores. I've heard varying things from people across the community that, for example, it doesn't have the super heavy American AP. Well, I can tell you for sure it must have the improved American AP penetration angles, even if it's not super heavy. And you'll see throughout the entire course of this game that we're going to shoot the AP almost exclusively, starting with this Harbin right here, who is attempting to slow down and smoke up. And that kind of performance right there with 3 citadels, very Baltimore-esque. So this thing is a cruiser killer. The AA on this ship has a AA defense rating of 77. It's probably not that great. The mid-range AA with 3.5 km range does the most damage, and the long range and the short range do practically nothing. So I don't think this is necessarily an AA cruiser. As for the maneuverability, we're looking at a 6.2 second rudder shift on this thing, 33 knot top speed, 730 meter turning circle. I don't think this is too far away from the Baltimore. And for the concealment, I've got it down to 10.3. I'm actually using the commander Hot Rod. He's a Transformers commander for the British line. And one of his skills is that he increases the duration of the radar consumable, which is good for the Celtic, because like the Baltimore, the Celtic comes with radar. Unlike the Baltimore, however, the range on this radar is 9.9 kilometers, but the duration is slightly shorter. It's got a base duration of 25 seconds compared to the Baltimore's 30. So with the Transformers commander guy, you can increase the time that the radar consumable is on. I've got it increased to 26.9 seconds, basically 27. So all in all, if you were going to buy this ship, this is basically a copy-paste of the Baltimore, flying under a different flag, and it does have one more thing going for it, I suppose, which is the improved British heal that heals back a lot more HP than the regular Baltimore's heal. Other than that, this is a Baltimore. And if I'm making a decision about whether I want to buy a premium ship, oftentimes I'm looking for something unique that I can't really get on a tech tree line. And with this ship, well, we already have the Baltimore, and we already have some premium copy-paste versions of the Baltimore, Xarkun Baltimore, for example. So in my mind, I don't really think this ship is worth buying, especially for 17,500 doubloons. That's already basically the price of a modern AAA game for a single ship in this game. Extremely steep. If you're going to pay that kind of money, I think you maybe want something a little bit more unique than this ship. However, this doesn't mean it's a bad ship. It is a Baltimore, and as such, it basically functions like the Baltimore and has to be played like one. So you'll notice throughout the entire course of this game that we are going to be focused exclusively on our positioning, and I think that's what I'd like to talk about for the rest of this battle. We've backed up to this alpha cap, and because of our concealment and the DD smoking up, we've been able to remain undetected. We've done a little bit of damage, only 32,000 so far, and we've spent about 5 minutes in this game. But with a ship like this, with this kind of good AP efficacy, you really need to focus on staying alive the entire game so that you can perform your duties as a cruiser and deal a lot of damage and also take care of the DDs. We're not really going to come up against the DD in this game. He's on the other side of the map, and I think my teammates are going to take him before we ever meet him. Right now, we're kiting away from the Alpha Cap. We don't really think there's a reason to push in there. Obviously, they've got an Iowa over there as well as another cruiser, which I think is a Flint, and our own teammate, which is coincidentally a Baltimore, has managed to flip the Alpha Cap. He's got himself tucked in behind an island where he's unreachable by the guns of both the Iowa and the Flint, and really, we need to get over here, in my mind, and start working on the ships that are in the center. There's no sense in pushing in toward that Baltimore. We can't help him by getting closer, and he's already taken the objective. Plus, he looks like he knows what he's doing. So I'm coming over here. I get a gift in the form of a broadside Edinburgh. Of course, I'm broadside to him as well, but my AP is a lot more effective. 4 citadels, and that's basically the end of the Edinburgh. He's been crippled by that AP. He launches torpedoes off one side of his ship, but he does that in a panic, and they come nowhere near me. Reversing now, trying to point his bow at me, which, of course, I can't really penetrate with his 30mm armor plating. This is the only time in the game I'm going to switch to the HE shells, so I can put him right through his 30mm bow. We do 5,300 damage, which is pretty good, not quite enough to take him out, but I can tell he is trying to turn his ship so that he can get torpedoes off the other side, but no, we're not going to allow that. We get some AP pens into his superstructure, and he goes down as our first kill of the game. This leaves the Cap in Bravo entirely open, and the Flint, Iowa, and Destroyer, as well as a battleship over there on the Charlie flank, are the only ships left alive. We've got a decent angle here on the Flint from inside of the Cap, or even, I think, inside of the Destroyer smokescreen for the next 50 seconds, which allows us to take that shot while being unspotted. Hopefully the aim here is better. This is something you have to get used to with both the Baltimore and this ship. These shells are pretty floaty relative to a lot of other cruisers, but when the AP comes down, it hits very hard. The Flint seems to be enjoying it himself. Meanwhile, our Baltimore teammate over there is apparently being an expert in cruiser positioning and island use. He's managed to dance around both this Flint and the Iowa this entire time, and while the Iowa is undoing his hard work of taking the Alpha Cap, I have secured Bravo, so we still have 2 caps to the enemy's 1, provided the Iowa can do this. Taking a bit of a calculated risk here, going broadside past this gap. Obviously the Iowa can see me, and he can probably shoot at me, but his guns aren't aimed this way. He's more concerned about my Baltimore teammate. So I take a shot with him at the AP. Mostly, in this little sequence, I was just trying to test out the efficacy of the AP against a broadside battleship. You know, see if I could get the same results as the Baltimore. And the numbers seem to indicate, yes, we're doing an awful lot of damage to this Iowa with every salvo we shoot at his broadside. This is not the kind of cruiser AP you want to sleep on. You need to respect it. Giving it broadside is dangerous. I think that was a salvo for 7,000 there, and the one before that was about 8,000. So this is battleship level damage just being done over time to the Iowa's broadside. He's now reduced to about half health, and he's intermittently spotting us as we shoot, trying to break line of sight as we go past this island. The Iowa is aiming at us, so we're going to start turning away, assuming he's going to shoot, trying to juke his shells, and perhaps because he can't see us over the island, he does miss there. He's not going to be floating for much longer, and we're going to need to start worrying about the other battleship here soon, because we're still spotted, most likely by the enemy destroyer. Not quite sure where it is, but there was an enemy battleship last spotted south of Charlie, over in that direction of the map, and what do you know, he shoots at us. It's a King George, though. We were pretty much expecting him to shoot, so we're already turning away, able to dodge his salvo there. We go dark, keeping our guns silent, and the Iowa, he is pushing straight into a cruiser who happens to have torpedoes, and he pays for it with his life. That just leaves the King George and the last remaining enemy destroyer left. Unfortunately, we don't get to show off the radar and meet that destroyer in combat, but you can, I assume, with your experience in this game, imagine the efficacy of this 9.9 km radar with its duration of 25 seconds. It's pretty nasty, catching destroyers, and that is ultimately the value of the Baltimore, and any copy-paste versions of the Baltimore like this is the efficacy of that radar consumable. In any case, the King George has gone dark behind that island. We don't really want to wait for him to get spotted because it doesn't look like there's anything in place to spot him. So we just shoot our guns so that we get spotted, and that prompts him to shoot at us, which gives away his location and allows us to shoot back at him. And of course he misses because we're messing with throttle to sort of reverse out of the way of his shots. Get another shot here on him. He's taken a hit from my teammates, and as long as he remains spotted, hopefully my teammates and I can focus him down, and basically just in this game. So I guess I'll give you my closing thoughts on the Celtic. I don't think I would buy it, personally. It is basically a Baltimore, and you could argue that it's a little bit of a spicier Baltimore with the changes to the radar and of course the British heel. But all in all, is it worth $70 when you could just grind out the Baltimore for free on the American Tech Tree line and more or less get the same experience out of that ship with the same amount of battle impact and efficacy? Because ultimately, I think these ships, Baltimore and Celtic, are on the same level. This is certainly a unique ship. I've enjoyed playing it. It is quite effective, but I don't think it's any more or less effective than the Baltimore would be, and as such, I don't see a very good reason to spend 17,500 doubloons on this thing when you could spend that money elsewhere in this game for ships that are, I think, a little bit more unique and don't have obvious counterparts already available for free in the game. And speaking of which, this game is ended. Only the enemy destroyer is left. He has absolutely no hope of winning, and yet he is keeping himself away from my teammates so that he isn't taken out. A little bit of a public service announcement to those of you who may not know. Every time you enter a battle, you pay your service costs in advance. It does not matter whether you survive the battle or whether you sink. So if you're the last ship left alive on a team, like this destroyer, there's really no reason to hold out the game. You have no hope of winning. You really don't even have a hope of sinking anybody with your torpedoes. So you might as well just shoot your guns, reveal your position, try to farm as much damage as you can with the guns, and then go down honorably. And it is Yudachi. Perhaps he was just doing one last-ditch torpedo effort, and he is in fact firing his guns and giving away his position. So you know what? I take back what I said about the Yudachi. He played it the right way. If you are in his position, you also should give your position away like this in the interest of ending the match before, before the time runs out. And I think this was a pretty good game on our part. This was in fact the first game I played in the Celtic. 135,000 damage, 3,200 base XP, and yeah, fairly good results. I guess another reason to get this is it's a premium, so there is credit boosted earnings, but ultimately I don't think I'd buy this ship. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.